So today we're going to continue with part 3 on the teaching on walking all his ways by quick overview on where we've been. We started out in Deuteronomy 10 and verse 12 where Moses is speaking to the children of Israel and he says, "And now Israel, what is it that Yahweh wants of you?" Well, he wants us to fear him and he wants us to walk in all his ways. And then there's more steps to it than that, but that's the order that he said it. He said we have to start out with fearing him and then we will walk in all of his ways. And so we've been doing a study on that. And we talked about in part 1 that we are to walk with and before Elohim. We had verses like when one of our forefathers was praying, when Jacob was praying, and he said, "The Elohim before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked." Okay, so we are to walk with and before Elohim. We talked about the agreement when it talks about in Amos that two cannot walk together unless they have an agreement or unless they have met and agreed. And we talked about the arrangement between Yahweh and his people in Exodus 19 and Deuteronomy 26 and 28, where basically Yahweh said, "This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take you as a separate people. I'm going to bless you and all of these things, but I expect certain things out of you. You're going to have to listen and obey and submit because my way will keep you safe and bless you." And all the people said, "Everything he said we'll do." I know I'm paraphrasing all this real quickly here, but basically that was the agreement. He said, "I'm going to tell you what works and what is best, and then if you do it, it'll all work out, and you will be my people, and I will be your Elohim, and this is all going to be nice." And so we had an arrangement where he said, "That's what I'm offering you," and we said, "Yes." Our forefathers all said, "Yes, we agreed to this." And so we agreed to walk together under that arrangement. And then we talked about his ways are righteous, his ways are correct, his ways are the best ways. We have verses for all of those things. And then we talked a little bit about Yahweh helping us in our walk, that his word, his instructions are a light onto our path. And so that helps us to see where to walk and how to walk. And so now I want to continue in part 3 here and getting into some of the details about this walk that we are to be doing. And some of the walk is in instructions that we find in Scripture is not just about what we are to be doing, but what we are not to be doing. And so we're going to look right now at a whole section of verses that he talks about not walking after other Elohim, not walking after other gods, after other mighty ones. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 19. Devarim 8 and in verse 19. Now, I'm going to read a bunch of verses here that are going to say some different things and some similar things. And there's probably people saying, "Well, you just read a verse that says the same thing." That's right. I will have read a verse that says the same thing as another verse. And I'm not doing it to bore you or to, kill a point, but to show you that he says it over and over again. And so the more he says it, the more we need to be paying attention to it. And obviously he must think it's a problem. Because if it wasn't a problem, he wouldn't feel the need to say it over and over again. Anybody a parent? Did you ever have to tell your child anything more than once? Did you ever have to tell him more than once in the same 10 minutes? Okay? See, that's the way we all are, and he's our father, and he feels like, you know what, I keep having to tell you the same thing. Please, don't do these things. Please do these other things. I know what I'm talking about. I created the whole thing. I know how it works. And we talked about that walking out his instructions, that his Torah instructions are there for two purposes. They're there to bless you and keep you safe. And if something is there to bless you and keep you safe, why would you not want to do these things, right? But he's also saying that there's other ways that you could walk. And they're walking in an arrangement with other mighty ones. And there's other directions that you could go. We were told in Scripture that you are to stay on the narrow path. Stay on the path and don't go left or right. And this is some of the verses that are dealing with the fact that our forefathers made the decision many times to go off the path. And he appeals to us not to make those mistakes. Deuteronomy, Devarim 8 and verse 19. "And it shall be, if you by any means forget Yahweh your Elohim and follow other mighty ones, and serve them and bow yourself to them, I have warned you this day that you shall certainly perish. Like the nations which Yahweh is destroying before you, so you are to perish, because you did not obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim." That's pretty strong stuff. He says, look, if you forget Yahweh, now it doesn't mean that you forget that there's a creator of the universe, but see, if if your mind is all distracted, it's like my children. There's times where I know they're not thinking about me and what I've said to them. Of course, they're 6 and 7 years old. They're easily distracted. But you know what? We can be 47 and 46 years old, or 57 and 56 years old, and they also be easily distracted. And then we are not focusing on him, and we forget our Father in heaven, and we forget the creator of the universe, and we just start walking in a different path in a different direction. So he says here, look, if you forget me, how do you do that? He's going to tell us, by following other mighty ones and serving them, then I have warned you. Now, what does that mean? Well, he says, I'm going to do this like the nations around you that were there, that I destroyed before you. The nations that Yahweh destroyed before them. What did these nations do? Did they keep Torah? No. They were worshiping all kinds of things, stone, earthen vessels, all kinds of paganism. So in other words, he says, if you find yourself going in those directions, you're going to be perishing just like they did. And the thing is that Scripture is true. So whatever he said he would do, he will do. And we have a lot of verses here that show that what he said he would do, he did. And we have that in the prophets where he says, remember I said that I was going to do all this stuff? If you did this, well, guess what? Go tell the people what I said was going to happen is now going to happen. That was a terrible job the prophets had to do, to go up there and say, you know, you were told and you were warned, and now Yahweh's got to do this to you. And it's you only have yourself to blame, right? Let's go down to Leviticus 18 and verse 1. Vayikra, Leviticus 18 and in verse 1. See, I think unfortunately a lot of people think, well, I don't have idols and I don't worship, pray to some stone thing or that kind of stuff, or pillars and stuff. So I can't be breaking this stuff. Well, let's get a little bit more detail about what Yahweh means when he says, do not go after other mighty ones. In Leviticus 18 and in verse 1, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Yisrael and say to them, I am Yahweh your Elohim. Do not do as they do in the land of Mitzrayim where you dwelt, and do not do as they do in the land of Canaan where I am bringing you, and do not walk in their laws. See, now he's making it clear what he's talking about. If you're doing as they do, if you walk in their laws, then you are, in a sense, following their mighty ones. And you are serving their mighty ones. And so this is where we have this terrible stark contrast between what unfortunately is being taught in mainstream Christianity, where people are being told to embrace things like Christmas and Ishtar, the Saturnalia and Ishtar wrapped up in some sort of good spin in their mind, right? But yet these are the things that they were doing in their lands that got, syncretized into the belief system. And he says here in many, many places, we're going to say, don't do as they do. Don't do as they do. So when we find ourselves, and we prayed about this during the prayer time, when we find ourselves pressured or being pushed in a direction of conforming with others around us, he says, look, you can't do that. You can't give in to that. You cannot do as they do if what they're doing isn't what I said to do. You cannot do as they do if it's not what I said to do. And we get ourselves in a position when we step out away from what everybody else is doing, where they're going to attack us. And they're going to try to drag us back to where we were, back to what we were doing before and what they're comfortable with. In verse 4, it says, do my right rulings and guard my laws to walk in them. I am Yahweh your Elohim. And you shall guard my laws and my right rulings, which a man does and lives by them. I am Yahweh. And one of the things that you'll find in this part of Leviticus, it's kind of between 17, 18, 19, and 20, is that he likes to emphasize like an exclamation point, because I said so. And the way he says it is because I am Yahweh. In other words, I have the authority to say this. I have the authority to insist upon this. I have the authority to tell you this is what's right and this is what's wrong. Because after all, I am Yahweh. I created all this stuff. Everything is mine. So he says it here at the beginning, in chapter 18 and verse 1, he says, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, I am Yahweh, your Elohim. So he starts off by telling, look, I've got this authority, now listen up. And then he finishes here at the end of verse 4, and he says, do my right rulings, guard my laws, walk in them, I am Yahweh, your Elohim. And to verse 5, he says again, I am Yahweh. It's almost like a parent saying, because I'm your parent, because I'm your father, I told you so. Don't argue with me. You have to listen and believe and trust a little bit. But why? I don't need to explain why. You're not old enough to understand why, maybe. You just have to trust and know that what I'm saying will keep you safe and bless you. That's the key. And if you don't listen, it's going to bring nothing but suffering and destruction and danger and everything else. Let's go to chapter 20. We're going to stay here in Leviticus. Chapter 20 and verse 22. And notice that he had worded this in the way of don't walk, in their laws, but walk in mine. So this walking is a really, really key thing. In verse 22, it says, and you shall guard all my laws and all my right rulings and do them so that the land which I am bringing you to dwell does not vomit you out. And do not walk in the laws of the nation which I am driving out before you, for they do all these, and therefore I loathe them. But I say to you, you are going to possess their land, and I myself give it to you to possess it, a land flowing with milk and honey. I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who has separated you from the peoples. So he says here, again, this is only a chapter or two later, he says, do not walk in their laws, the laws of the nations around you, because they're doing all these things that I loathe. I don't know about you, but I don't want to do anything that he loathes. Okay? But notice that he says, I'm bringing you into this land, and if you don't do what I say, the land is going to vomit you out. That's pretty graphic. I mean, that's a pretty bad thing right there. And when I see the word vomit you out, I was turning to, in my mind, I went to Mishlei 26 and verse 11. If you hold your place here, we'll go to Proverbs 26 and verse 11. This is not a term he's used just this one time. He's used it in many places, the idea of being vomited out, or the use of the word vomit. I never thought I'd be up in front of a microphone in front of a bunch of people saying vomit so many times, but he wrote it. I'm just reading it. What can I do? Mishlei 26 and verse 11. He says, as a dog returns to his own vomit, so a fool repeats his folly. You see, that's a great analogy for us as we come to understand what they're doing in their ways and walking in these other ways is wrong. And if we leave that and start walking in Torah and in truth, and then we return back to the folly of the old ways, that's like a dog going after its own vomit. That's another pretty ugly sight right there to picture. I mean, that's the way he sees this. I mean, and you sit there when you first think of that phrase and you go, ugh. Well, yeah, that's the way he thinks of it when you start going back to, ugh. Why would you go back to that stuff? And so then I want us to go now to 2 Peter 2, and I'll read you a bunch of stuff out of 2 Peter 2 about this whole idea and bring it into more modern terms of, again, the idea of walking in the ways of the people around us and the stuff that makes it look like a fool going after his own folly. 2 Peter 2, we start in verse 1. I'm going to read most of the chapter here. But there also came to be false prophets among the people, as also among you there shall be false teachers, who shall secretly bring in destructive heresies and deny the master who brought them, bringing swift destruction on themselves, and many shall follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. And in greed with fabricated words they shall use you for gain. From of old their judgment does not linger, and their destruction does not slumber. Does that not sound a lot like what's going on today? Very much like what Ezekiel said in Ezekiel 22, about there's a conspiracy amongst our prophets to get, greedy gain and to not separate the profane from the kadosh, from the clean and the unclean, right? And what he's talking about here is that there's going to be those coming in, and they're going to be teaching in a way that's going to take the truth and make it sound like it's evil. It's wrong to keep the law. Don't keep the law, that horrible, burdensome thing. You don't want to keep that. Isn't that what teachers are teaching? Can you imagine? That which was designed to keep you safe and bless you is being spoken of as being something that is burdensome and you should never want it. That was for them because they were bad. But we're called now special. We happen to be born, fortunately, after Messiah was here. So that makes us special in some way. And I'm here to tell you, it makes no difference when you were born. If you were born before or after, everything still would have had to play out the way it played. And you're no more blessed or less blessed because you were born after. And I think that we get messed up with that sometimes. Like we think, well, we're more special because we know and he's been here and he's now sitting at the right hand. Well, that was always going to happen. That was part of the plan from the beginning of time. So whether you were born before or after didn't make a difference. And he's saying here, look, he says, there are these destructive teachers that are out there going to be putting these things in here and fabricating words. What does that mean? The idea of saying, thus said Yahweh, when Yahweh had not said. And we read verses like that also in Ezekiel 22 and in other places. But now listen to what it continues to say here in verse 4, and we'll continue. For if Elohim did not spare the messengers who sinned, but sent them to Tartarus and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be kept for judgment, and did not spare the world of old, but preserved Noach, a proclaimer of righteousness, and 7 others, bringing in the flood on the world of the wicked, and having reduced to ashes the cities of Sodom and Amorah, condemned them to destruction, having made them an example to those who afterward would live wickedly, and rescued righteous Lot, who was oppressed with indecent behavior of the lawless. For day after day, that righteous man dwelling among them tortured his righteous being by seeing and hearing their lawless works. Then Yahweh knows how to rescue the reverent ones from trial and to keep uprightness unto the day of judgment to be punished. And most of all, those walking after the flesh in filthy lust and despising authority, bold, headstrong, speaking evil of esteemed ones. See, these are all acts that match up with what he just said in Leviticus. These are things that are walking after the ways that the people around in those other nations did. These are things they did. They didn't just bow down to an idol. He says, but these like natural, unreasoning beasts have been born to be caught and destroyed, blaspheme that which they do not know, shall be destroyed in their destruction, being about to receive the wages of unrighteousness, deeming indulgence in the day of pleasure, spots and blemishes, reveling in their own deceptions while they feast with you. Having eyes filled with an adulteress and unable to cease from sin, enticing unstable beings, having a heart trained in greed, children of a curse, having left the right way that they went astray, having followed the way of Balaam, the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but he was rebuked for his transgression. A dumb donkey, speaking with the voice of a man, restrained the madness of the prophet. These are fountains without water, clouds driven by a storm, to whom the blackest darkness is kept forever. For speaking arrogant nonsense, they entice, through the lust of the flesh, through indecencies, the ones who have indeed escaped from those living in delusion, promising them freedom, though themselves being slaves of corruption, for one is a slave to whatever overcomes him. For if after they have escaped the defilements of the world through the knowledge of the Master and Savior Yeshua Messiah, they are again entangled in them and overcome, the latter end is worse than the first. For it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it, to turn from the set-apart command delivered unto them. For them the proverb has proved true. A dog returns to his own vomit, and a washed sow returns to her rolling in the mud. Now, I don't normally read a whole chapter like that. But that chapter covered a whole lot of stuff that you and I can find ourselves entangled in without thinking about this as being bowing down to a big giant statue of Chemosh, okay, or Dagon or something. You can get entrapped in all of these lusts of the flesh and indecencies and speaking evil behind and attacking and Lashon Hara and all this other stuff and the greedy gain and the arrogant nonsense that people are speaking. You know what arrogant nonsense is? Those of you out there, and I'm not trying to pick or attack, who get in everybody's face that you're so smart and they're wrong, trying to convince them of some doctrinal stuff. That's arrogant nonsense. Okay? Because you are now thinking, I'm so smart, I need to straighten everybody else out. Now, you may be right about the doctrine, but thinking that it's your job to run in there and go ahead and straighten everybody else out, that's the nonsense. And that's the arrogance. And we get that way. We get so filled with knowledge that we think that we have to go ahead and do these things. And some people become Torah terrorists, and they want to beat each other up with the word. You know, it's a two-edged sword, but it's not for you to be wielding to go ahead and beat people up and kill them. It's going to cut through you like a double-edged sword. And that's what it's meant to be as you read it and are convicted of what it says. But it's not for you to be wielding against people. Now, you want to wield it against the enemy? Great, that's what Yeshua did. You feel like you're being oppressed and Hasatan is getting in your face and trying to drag you down? You start quoting some verses in his face. Don't do that to each other, though. That's not love. That's not meekness. That's not gentleness. That's not compassion. That's not mercy. But see, understand, when Peter is talking here, this is describing absolutely what was going on then, what was going on when Moshe was talking, and what was going on now, and everything in between. He brings it all the way back to the flood days, to what was going on when Noah was around, and how the things that the people were doing ended up having the whole world wiped out, except for the 7, right? So this is why I wanted to read this chapter. I want us to get a much clearer understanding of what it means to go back to the vomit. When we come out of a lifestyle, when we come out of ignorance, when we are delivered from our ignorance about how things really work and about how there is a creator and that there is a Messiah and that there is a forgiveness of sin and there was a sacrifice that was done to make these things possible and that there is a teshuvah to be done. And then after making all of those moves, we go back to the old ways. Not the old ways of our fathers, the old ways of our life when we were in the world and we were doing whatever. And now that stuff can easily creep back into what we're doing. And that's what he's warning us about. Revelation chapter 3 and verse 14. Revelation chapter 3 and verse 14. And the messenger to the assembly of Laodicea write, the Amen, the trustworthy and the true witness, the beginning of the creation of Elohim says this, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I would that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither cold or hot, I am going to vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, rich I am, and I am made rich, and need nothing at all, and do not know that you are wretched and pitiful and pitiable and poor and blind and naked, I advise you to buy from me gold refined in the fire so that you become rich, and white garments so that you become dressed, so that the shame of your nakedness may not be shown, and anoint your eyes with the ointment so that you see. As many as I love, I reprove and I discipline, so be ardent and repent. See, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I shall come into him and dine with him and he with me. To he who overcomes, I shall give to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. He's talking about a bunch of people that get lukewarm. They don't have the fervent, ardent desire to repent. And that's a daily thing. You know, this is the problem with, we say, well, I was saved. Well, no, you were delivered out of ignorance. You were delivered out of the world into truth, but you're still working on being saved. Okay? Does that make any sense? What did he just say? Saved. In other words, he says, to he who overcomes, to the end, actually is another verse we could read where it says, whoever comes to the end shall inherit all these things. Well, if you're saved, meaning it's all done, finished, you're in, you've got your papers and your certificate, then why would you have to overcome anything? What would there be to do? How could you return to your vomit? And if you did, why would it matter? You're saved. See, because it does matter. It's a daily thing. You know, in John, he says, in John 15, it says, every branch in me, that sounds like a saved person, who bears no fruit is pruned and thrown in the fire. Well, so much for once saved, always saved. Doesn't work that way. There was a time in your life where you were delivered or saved out of the lack of knowledge or the ignorance about how things really work. You were delivered out of the ignorance about the fact that there's a creator, that there's a son who died for you, that there's salvation that's been available to you and provided available to you free by grace. You did nothing to earn it. It was something he wanted to do because it meets his purposes, it meets his goals, it meets his ends, not because of you. And so he's telling us, look, I didn't do all of this. I didn't deliver you out of your ignorance so that you could just go back to it. I set you on a path so that you can continue to grow in grace and knowledge, and that you can peel off and carve off more pieces of the imperfections, so you can become more and more like me, not so that you would return to the old ways you were. That make sense? Come as you are, but don't stay that way. That's what this is all about. We are allowed and welcome to come as we are, but he doesn't want us to stay that way. He wants us to become like him. Deuteronomy 4 and verse 1. Devarim, Deuteronomy 4 and in verse 1. Devarim, Deuteronomy 4 and verse 1. And now, O Yisrael, listen to the laws and the right rulings which I am teaching you to do, so that you live, and shall go in and possess the land which Yahweh Elohim of your fathers is giving you. Doesn't that sound just like the 67 other verses we've read over the last 3 weeks? And I'm not reading you a verse we've read before. We've not read this verse before. But yet he says this over and over and over. He says in verse 2, do not add to the word which I command you, and do not take away from it, so as to guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim, which I am commanding you. Your eyes have seen what Yahweh did at Baal Peor, for Yahweh your Elohim has destroyed from your midst all the men who followed Baal Peor. But you, who are clinging to Yahweh your Elohim, are alive today, every one of you. See, I have taught you laws, right rulings, as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me to do thus in the land which you go to possess. And you shall guard and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding before the eyes of the peoples, who hear all these laws, and they shall say, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. Wow, so the world is going to call people that keep Torah wise and understanding. Unfortunately, the mainstream is teaching that if you're keeping Torah, you're somehow showing that what Yeshua did wasn't sufficient. And we have to understand, and I'm sure I said this here last week or the week before, but just so I have it again to make sure it's on tape, Yeshua did everything he needed to do. He didn't do everything you need to do. Maybe that was just too simple and profound. He only did everything he needed to do. You still have to do what you need to do. And that's a real important thing. Unfortunately, mainstream is teaching that he did everything you need to do and everything he needed to do, so there's nothing for you to do. Am I exaggerating it? Isn't that not what they're saying? Okay? And yet, their blindness that's there, we pray would be lifted, so that they can understand that there's a lot to be done and we need to be going about our Father's business and doing it. But notice what it said here in verse 4. It says, you who are clinging to Yahweh, we're going to do a whole teaching on that, are alive. Now do we understand what happened at Baal Peor? Okay? There was a mixing together of the people that was going on. Hold your place here. Let's go to Numbers 25, Bimidbar 25. Let's just read that for a second so we understand what was going on. Well, we can look at Pinchas, our hero, in this particular scenario. Numbers 25, verse 1. And Yisrael dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab, and they invited the people to the slaughterings of their mighty ones, and the people ate and bowed down to their mighty ones. You see what was happening? They were having fun. They were dealing with the lusts of the eyes and the lusts of the flesh, and they were being drawn into the vomit. And what had happened in that? They were having so much fun, they forgot about Yahweh, their Elohim. So verse 3, thus Yisrael was joined to Baal Peor. So they joined themselves to another group. It already says that we had a contract. We have an agreement to be joined to him. Okay? And he is very zealous and jealous that we only be joined to him, to Yahweh. But they joined themselves to Baal Peor, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel. And Yahweh said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Israel. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, each one of you slay his men who were joined to Baal Peor. And see, one of the children of Israel came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tent of meeting. So here they're starting to try to fix this. They're trying to get this thing set right. And there's a guy just in their face, brings this woman in front of everyone, just flying in the face of those who are crying at the door, who are realizing they messed up. And when Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, verse 7, son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a spear in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague among the children of Israel came to a stop. And those who died in the plague were 24,000. This is serious. This is serious. And by the way, if you picture this, Pinchas went into a tent. He caught them probably in a sexual position and pierced them both right through. And it went into her belly. They were together, and he just said, this has got to stop. And I'm going to guess that what happened was, while they were crying at the tent of meeting and weeping, they were weeping because they didn't want to do what they were told, which was to grab the leaders and hang them up. They were told, judges, go grab those men and string them up. This has got to stop. And they didn't want to do it, I'm guessing. And Pinchas stood up and said, I'm going to do this. This has got to stop. See, one man can make a difference. Pinchas stood up and made a difference. He took action. So back here again, we were in Deuteronomy 4. And continuing here in verse 8, we just read in verse 7, it says, for what great nation is there which has Elohim so near to it as Yahweh or Elohim is to us whenever we call on him? That's verse 7, because in verse 6 it said, only a wise and understanding people is this great nation. See, that we're supposed to be able to get the people to see him so clearly that they know and say, wow, what's with this people? This people that have a relationship. This people that have Elohim so near to it as Yahweh or Elohim is near to us whenever we call on him. Because these people call on stone and brick and mortar and clay and get nothing. They deluded themselves that those were gods that actually would answer their prayers. But yet when Israel cried out to Yahweh, things happened. And the world around them noticed that real quickly. It says here in verse 9, so let's go back to verse 8. So in verse 8 it says, and what great nation is there that has such laws and righteous right rulings like all this Torah which I set before you this day? Wow, Torah is supposed to be something people are envious of that we have it. Not something they go, why would you do all that stuff? That burdensome. Why would you go to that? You know? It was supposed to be something people would be jealous that we had. And say, hey, what great nation is there that has such laws like this Torah that we have? Only guard yourself and guard your life diligently, lest you forget the words your eyes have seen, unless they turn aside from your heart all the days of your life, and you shall make them known to your children and your grandchildren. See, our job is to teach the Torah. Didn't we read that in Deuteronomy 6 when we do the Vahafta, where it says, and you shall teach it to your children, diligently to your children, when you rise up and when you lay down and when you walk by the way. Right? In everything that we do, we're supposed to be teaching them the Torah. It is really critical. But it says here, and what great nation should have such laws as these? And yet we have an entire mainstream teaching people that you shouldn't want these things. It was a burden and it was for them, and now we have freedom. I don't know. I don't think I'd like that freedom, because in that freedom, I'm only going to get myself in trouble. In that freedom, I'm only going to get myself into bad places that are not safe, and it will be cursed. And Yahweh doesn't say necessarily that I will curse you just because you don't listen to me. I think he's really saying, if you do what I say because I created the universe and I know how it works, it brings blessing. That's how I built it. And if you do not do what I say, it brings cursing, because that's how I built it. And I'm just telling you that. Not that he's standing there going, well, you didn't listen, so I'm going to punish you, I'm going to curse you. No, he's saying, look, not listening brings the curse, period. I don't have to do anything more. It's going to happen all on its own. I'm trying to let you know this is how I designed the system. I designed it, I created it, I put it all together, I'm the only one that knows how it works, and I'm going to actually give you a book that teaches you how it works. Wasn't that nice of him? Okay, we have an instruction manual that tells us this is how it works. But he also tells us this is how it doesn't work. So be aware. And that's why he says, please, it's like he's pleading with us. Please guard and keep, do what I say. Don't do this other stuff. Do what I say, please. Deuteronomy 6 and in verse 10. We're going to continue here right after what would have been the Ve'ahavta verses. In verse 4 it says, Shema Yisrael, Hear O Yisrael, right? And we go through the Ve'ahavta there. And in verse 10 it says, And it shall be when Yahweh your Elohim brings you into the land which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov, and to give you great and good cities which you did not build, and houses filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, and wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you shall eat and be satisfied. Be on guard, lest you forget Yahweh, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from the house of bondage. See, this is the problem. He's saying, look, when life starts getting good, the tendency is to forget where it all came from. It was the blessings promised for being good. It was the blessings promised for obedience. And so don't think for a second that somehow your might and your strength and somehow this is all just the way it works and had nothing to do with him. It's the way it works because it has everything to do with him. He says, lest you forget, verse 12. He says, verse 13, Fear Yahweh your Elohim and serve him and swear by his name. Do not go after other mighty ones, the mighty ones of the peoples who are all around you. For Yahweh your Elohim is a jealous El in your midst, lest the displeasure of Yahweh your Elohim burn against you. Then he shall destroy you from the face of the earth. Now, why would he say these things thousands of times, literally, just to say, okay, it was nailed to the cross and done away with, you don't have to pay any attention to it? He didn't just say, look, I think it's a good idea. He said, this is a way that if you don't listen, your Elohim will have his displeasure burn against you and he'll destroy you off the face of the earth. That's how serious he is. Yet we have a mainstream that wants to tell us, you don't have to do this stuff. As a matter of fact, if you're doing it, as something that you feel that you have to please Yahweh or whatever, well, then you're showing that what Yeshua did wasn't good enough. That's just insanity. But it's only insanity if you're reading all this stuff to the left of Matthew. Now, that's not to say the stuff to the right of Matthew doesn't say the exact same thing, because it does. But they've bent and twisted that all out of shape so badly, people don't understand. But if they understand, like, for example, what Kepha is quoting, when Kepha says about a dog returning to its vomit, and they know that that comes out of Mishlei, out of Proverbs 26, if they know that that refers to things that were in the prophets, okay, that we read in Luke chapter 20 also, and then in Mishlei 26:11, and then we read it in Revelation, it's all the same thing. But he says here, lest you forget and go after other gods, be careful. Jeremiah 9, Yirmiyahu 9 and verse 12. Yirmiyahu 9 and in verse 12. I know some of you sitting there going, man, we've been listening to this for 3 weeks now. We get it. You know what? There's a joke, you've all heard me tell it before, but I'll tell it again anyway. But there was a pastor, gave a sermon, and it was just well received. The congregation thought it was awesome, and they went up to the pastor afterwards and said, Pastor, that was great. We really appreciate it. That was just a powerful message. And we're excited to come back next week and hear what you have to say. And they came back the next week all ready and sitting just ready to listen. And he gave the same exact sermon. But you know what? It was still really good, so nobody really said anything. They figured, well, it was good. It was still good. We could, no problem. And they all came back the next week, and wouldn't you know, he gave the same sermon a third time. Now they're thinking, maybe it's Alzheimer's. Maybe the pastor's starting to forget. Maybe we need to say something. So they went up to him and said, Pastor, look, nothing personal. Don't take this wrong. We thought the message was great. Matter of fact, we thought it was great 3 times now. But you've given the same teaching 3 times in a row, 3 weeks. What's going on? He said, well, it's no problem at all. He said, I'll make you a deal. When you guys start doing it, I'll stop saying it. See, that's the whole thing, is that, sometimes I know some of the people who are listening on tape or sitting even here in this room will sit there going, he's just killing this thing and beating it to death, and why are we doing this 3 weeks? Because I'm not even reading the fraction of a fraction of a fraction of how many times he said it. So it must be a problem. It must be a problem that we can easily fall into a place where we're comfortable and life is going okay, and that we start to forget why it's going okay, and where the source was, and that it was because we were obeying that things were working. And so then we think that, well, if I do anything, it'll work. And you could start to compromise, and you could start to give in on the edges, and start to, to conform and match up with some of the family and friends that are pushing on you and leaning on you and pressuring you and attacking you. Because you just want that to stop. See, but it says to he who overcomes. What do you have to overcome? Maybe your family and friends and coworkers and bosses all leaning on you. And not give in to all that. And maybe the reason the Father hasn't taken it away from you is because without it, he won't be able to know whether or not you would give in. But he's pushing on you to see, because he said in Deuteronomy 8, he's testing you to prove you to know. He wants to know. Oh, but he's the Almighty, doesn't he know? Whether he knows or not isn't my business. What he wants to know, he wants to see you do it. That's what he says. Whether he already knows or not, you know what? That's him. He says he wants you to do it. He wants to see you do it. So he's going to test you to see you do it. He wants you to walk it out. He wants to actually see what you will do. Jeremiah chapter 9 and verse 12. Jeremiah 9 and in verse 12. Who is the wise man that he understands this? And to whom has the mouth of Yahweh spoken that he declares it? Why has the land perished? Has it been burned up like a wilderness, and with none passing through? See, this is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Here's a prophet who's now speaking to the people saying, you're probably all sitting there going, why did this happen? I don't get it. Why did all this terrible stuff happen? He says, look, verse 13, and Yahweh says, because they have forgotten and forsaken my Torah, which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, nor walked according to it, but they have walked according to the stubbornness of their own heart, and after the Baals which their fathers had taught them. Therefore, thus Yahweh of hosts, Yahweh Sevaot, the Elohim of Israel, says, see, I am making this people eat wormwood, and I shall make them drink poison water, and I shall scatter them among the Gentiles, whom neither they nor their fathers have known, and I shall send a sword after them until I have consumed them. This is fulfilling exactly what he promised in the verses we were reading in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus. It's not like he's saying, okay, you guys, I'm going to do this to you now, and never gave them any warning. It's not like you're a child and your parent comes up to you and goes and gives you a little smack on the rear end, and the child looks at you like, what was that for? And the parent goes, for this. And you say, well, you never told me doing that was a problem. Father tells us what's a problem. We have the scripture that tells us this stuff is a problem. And clearly, there's a long time here between Moshe saying it and Yirmiyahu saying it. And there's a long time between Yirmiyahu saying it and my saying it. And I'm just reading it out of this book. Yet, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We all can fall into this problem. We all can fall into this problem. Go to chapter 13. We'll stay in Yirmiyahu 13. And in verse 1. Thus Yahweh said to me, this is one of my favorites. Thus Yahweh said to me, go and get yourself a linen girdle and put it on your loins, but do not put it in water. So I bought a girdle according to the word of Yahweh and put it on my loins. And the word of Yahweh came to me the second time, saying, take the girdle that you have bought, which is on your loins, and arise and go to the Euphrates and hide it there in a hole in the rock. By the way, it's not every day that I get to give a sermon where I say vomit and girdle in the same sermon, so this is a kind of a strange moment for me. Talking about vomit, now about girdles. But the message is profound. Okay, so far what we have here, Yahweh speaks to him and says, look, go get this girdle and gird yourself up. Okay? Then he says, take the girdle that you bought. He says, now go and hide it in the rock there by the Euphrates. And it came to be after many days, verse 6, that Yahweh said to me, arise and go to the Euphrates and take from there the girdle which I commanded you to hide there. So I went to the Euphrates and dug, and I took the girdle from the place where I had hidden it. And there was the girdle ruined. It was completely useless. Now, you got to believe at this point, Yirmiyahu's kind of going, where's this going? I mean, but you never see him asking. You see, Yahweh says, go ahead and get yourself a girdle. Oh, go ahead. He does it. Now go ahead and do this with it. And he goes ahead. And he's got to be sitting there going, because as you're reading this, the first time you ever read this, you've got to be thinking, where is this going? Right? I mean, he says, okay, go ahead and take it. And he says, and then stick it in this hole. And now it's useless. And then Yahweh says to him, he says, okay, now the word comes to him in verse 8. He says, thus says Yahweh, thus I ruin the pride of Yehudah and the great pride of Jerusalem. This evil people who refuse to hear my words, who walk in the stubbornness of their heart and walk after other mighty ones, to serve them, to bow themselves to them, is like this girdle, which is completely useless. See, he was trying to give him a great physical metaphor for the problem. See, when you gird yourself up, you need something that's going to cling and bind nice and tight and hold everything together. You soak that in water for a good long time, and it's going to become so useless. It will not be able to bind anything. And that's what he's saying. He says, look, this people who refuse to listen to me, they're just like this. Now, why would he call a people useless? Unless they were supposed to be useful. In other words, they were there for a purpose. He had a use for them. Okay? See, he's not saying, look, they just didn't listen. He said, they have become useless to me. I called them out for a reason. I pulled them out for a purpose, to point the finger to me, to show the world that my ways work, to show the world that there is a creator, that I am supreme, and that I am in charge. And when they do what they want, according to the stubbornness of their own heart, they are useless to my purpose. Verse 11, for as the girdle clings to the loins of a man, so I have caused all the house of Israel and all the house of Yehudah to cling to me, declares Yahweh, to become mine for a people and for a name and for a praise and for an adorning, but they did not listen. But they did not listen. See, he has a reason for us to be here. He has a purpose for us to be here. And it's not about us. Believe it or not, it's about us and how we can affect all of the thems. The goyim, the nations. We're supposed to be a light to them. We're supposed to be an example to them. We're supposed to be something that makes them be provoked to want to have whatever it is we have. So none of this is about us. You don't get the blessings because of you. You don't get all of the other things because of you. It's so that you can be useful to him in reaching everybody else. Does that make sense? But yet, when we want to go in our own stubbornness of our own hearts and say, yeah, but I really do still like to do this, or I really still don't want to do that. And I really still want to do this, and I really don't want to do that. Listen, I'm going to pick on the guys a little bit. Guys, why don't you have seat on? It's a commandment, just like not stealing, just like not murdering, just not no adultery. Oh, listen, I'll tell you what, people don't like a couple of things. Don't tell me what to wear, don't tell me what to eat, and don't tell me what days to keep. Otherwise, we're okay. We can agree about not murdering and not committing adultery and not stealing, and we can agree about all that stuff, but don't tell me what days to keep, don't tell me what to wear, and don't tell me what I can eat. I don't know, Numbers 15 seems pretty clear, okay, that we're to wear them. And they're there for a purpose, to remind you that you don't do this. In other words, remind you to keep the Torah. But I know very few of the guys out there, when I go to congregations and everywhere else, they're not wearing them. Now I'm not judging you. I know what it feels like as a guy to go, but I'm going to wear those and people are going to look at me and what are they going to say? Nothing. They're not going to say anything. I'm here to tell you. Tony, do people generally say anything? They never do. They'll look at them. They're thinking real loud, wanting to say something. Mostly they want to ask. They're curious. Well, what is that? Why do you wear those? I got a few looks like that the other day at the real estate office. People noticing them on my pants. But they won't say anything. So if you're embarrassed and thinking they're going to say something, they're not. And if they do, it's going to be behind your back anyway, which is Lashon Hara. They shouldn't be doing that anyway. So they're going to reap what they sow on that. But they're not going to. And then for all of those of you out there who've always wanted to have a reason to open up a discussion with someone about Torah, if they do say something, they're going to say this: hey, what's up with those things on your pants? And guess what? You have a great opportunity to say, well, you know what? That's from Numbers 15. Hey, by the way, that's from Matthew, where the woman with the issue of blood reached up and connect the two. You see? So that people understand why you wear them. There's your conversation piece. There's your icebreaker. And sometimes I actually start the conversation because I see them staring at them, wanting to say something. I go, it's okay, you can ask. I actually give them the freedom. I say, it's okay, you can ask. I can see you want to. So you can ask. But see, it's our stubbornness of heart. There's things that we just don't want to do, and there's things that we just don't want to give up. We got them on both sides. The stuff we still just don't want to do it, and the stuff that we still want to do that we don't want to let go of. And both of those things fall into this category of making us useless. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be thought of as useless to him. I'm looking for well done, good and trustworthy servant. I'm looking for blessed of my Father, sit at the right hand. I am not looking for you are useless. So that's a really, really key point there. Let's go to Isaiah 65. I have to skip a couple of verses here and work this out. Otherwise, we're not going to finish this today. And here's some really good news. Guess what we're going to talk about next week? Part 4. I've already planned that. Because in part 4, which was supposed to be in part 3, I'd like to show you a lot of verses out of the apostolic texts. I want to show you from the Brit Hadashah. And I just haven't had the time to do it yet because I really want to finish making these points. Isaiah 65, Yeshayahu 65 and verse 1. I have let myself be inquired of, not by those who asked. I was found not by those who sought me. I said, here I am, to a nation not calling on my name. I have held out my hands all day long to a stubborn people who walk in a way that is not good, after their own thoughts, the people who provoke me continually to my face, who slaughter in gardens and burn incense on altars of brick, who sit among the graves and spend the night in secret places, who eat flesh of pigs, and the broth of unclean meat is in their pots. See, and by the way, I don't want you sitting there going, well, let's see, it's a checklist. Okay, I don't slaughter in gardens, I'm not burning incest, I don't eat pigs. And no, he's giving examples of problems with this particular group of people at that time. But when you are walking according to the nations around you and not walking in his ways, you are provoking him to his face. You are being a stubborn person, walking after your own thoughts and provoking him to his face. He's just listing a few things here that they particularly were doing. But that wasn't the end-all, be-all of the list. That's just pieces of Torah bread that's being broken, right? Either idolatry he was talking about, kashrut he was talking about, right? And by the way, I need to have us pray that mainstream Christianity, instead of focusing on a wrong interpretation of Mark chapter 7, would embrace this verse to understand that eating pig provokes Yahweh to his face. And if that's the way it is, then why would it all of a sudden be okay? If Yahweh doesn't change, then eating it will always provoke him to his face. Right? Yes. And he says here, look, he says, I have held out my hands to a stubborn people, a people who provoke me to my face. Now that is just very strong. I mean, I don't know what else is. I mean, he's saying we're provoking him. I don't know, I've got kids, sometimes they push me too. I'm like, you're just starting to push it a little too far. That's what children do. I did it to my parents, right? I know what it feels like to have children provoke you to your face. When you tell them not to do something, they stand right up and do it anyway. Now, don't tell me your kids never do that. I know they did. They all do. Because they're stubborn, and they're going after their own thoughts. And their thought was to do whatever it is you said no. And they thought, but I want to, and it's right, and it's good, and I like it, and why can't I do it? I don't see any reason why I can't do it, so I'm going to do it anyway. And they'll do it right in front of you. And you look at them like, You don't even have words sometimes. What are you doing? How could you just be doing that in front of me? I just told you not to do that. And yet we do that to the Father, don't we? So that's what he's talking about here. In verse 5, he says, who say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, for I am set apart to you. These are smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all day. They're basically saying to the prophets, get away from me. I don't need you. I'm fine. Nothing wrong with me. I don't need to be told. Proverbs 28 and verse 26, I'm just going to quote it. It says, one who trusts in his heart is a fool, but one who walks wisely is delivered. We're told in Jeremiah 17:9 that the heart is crooked above all things. We're told to take every thought into captivity. I know we've quoted this before, but just so that we remember that that's what's going on here. We're motivated by our emotions. But I want this, I like it, I want it, I like it. So I need to try to find a way to say that it's okay to do it. And I'm going to try and spin it. I'm going to try and convince myself that he's going to be okay with it. And he's not. And the reality is, he's not. He's not okay with it. He's just not. Psalm 81. And we're actually going to be able to wrap this thing up here in 2 more sections. That's going to work out really well. Psalm 81, Tehillim 81, and in verse 8. Hear, O my people, and let me warn you. O Israel, if you would listen to me, let there be no strange mighty one among you, and do not bow down to a foreign mighty one. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people did not listen to my voice, and Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their own stubborn heart to walk in their own counsels. Oh, if my people had listened to me, Israel would walk in my ways. I would subdue their enemies at once and turn my hand against their adversaries. He's saying here, look, I tried, I begged, but I had to just turn them over. And when I turned them over, what he's saying is, if you're not going to listen, I'm going to have to let you suffer the consequences. At some point, you have to just let the natural consequences happen. And he said, look, I begged them, but they wouldn't listen, so I had to let this stuff happen. And I know that it's really a hard thing here when it says, let there be no strange mighty one. And everyone is so convinced, but I don't worship other deities. I don't worship other gods. Look, let's be blunt and honest. The mainstream of Christianity has turned the Jesus understanding of Messiah into a God, separate from the Father, above all things, and to be worshipped as the one who says you don't have to do Torah. Am I exaggerating it? I know it's a hard thing, though, because they're being misled and misrepresented by their teachers, who are being misrepresented and misled by their seminaries, who are being following after the delusions of a couple of thousand years of wrong teaching. Okay? The Messiah promotes Torah observance. The one they are promoting says it's all right and been done away with. They don't look to the Father. They pray to, worship, and sing to, and bow down to this Messiah figure. Don't they? Because it's all about him. And Yeshua said, it's not about me, it's about him. And he pointed up to the Father. That's right. Okay? He says, I have a role in this. But that's to point you to the Father. I have a role in this to show you that I only do what the Father says. I have a role in this to show you how to do what you're supposed to do it like I did it, which is in submission to the Father. Yes. He says, I don't need you to bow down to me. As a matter of fact, I'm going to gird myself up and wash your feet. And they tried to say, no, don't do that. He says, no, if I don't do that, then you've got nothing. If you can't understand that I am not the one that needs to be worshipped and prayed to and bowed down, I will give you my authority. You ask things in my name, in my authority as the Messiah, as the adversary, as the advocate, as the one who's advocating on your behalf, okay, as your intercessor, but you go and focus your attention vertically on the Father. Yes. Mainstream isn't teaching that. Mainstream isn't teaching that. It's all about adoring, worshiping, praying to, loving, and focusing on a false overlay on top of the true Messiah. And that's what he's saying here in all of these things. It says, and they're all thinking, but I'm not bowing down to an idol. I'm not worshiping, some whatever, stone or statue or something. I don't know. You're going after something that points away from Torah. And this is what's so terrible. And they don't know. And they're falling in love with Messiah, and they don't know. And they're allowing the one that they're looking at to lead them away from truth. And they don't know. And it's hard. And I know some of you are just 5 minutes out of all that. And I'm glad you are. And I hope you don't think I'm being too hard. I'm not being hard on the people in it. They don't know. They're doing it in complete, honest adoration of what they understand. They don't know. They're not trying to do it wrong. They're just doing it in the amount of knowledge they have. Just like you did. Until you were given some additional knowledge and clarity and distinctions of what really is going on and what really is the truth. Right? Okay? So this is really, really important that we understand. So I know when we keep reading about bowing down to idols, how does that match up in today's society? You don't see a lot of people with these idols sitting up on their mantelpiece. Wait a minute, you may see a cross, though. You may see plenty of those. He did not want us to make those, okay, and wear them around our necks and put them up in our houses and bow down to them pretty much. Actually, in a lot of churches, they do. They walk over, they kneel down in front of the cross, and they pray. Is that not idolatry? Am I exaggerating? But it's a terrible system that people are trapped in. We need to pray that they're set free. Then they need to be saved out of being saved. And the way you guys all laughed, I know I don't have to clarify that. You know exactly what I mean. Okay? Ezekiel 13, we'll finish with this. Ezekiel 13 and verse 1. Ezekiel 13 and verse 1. And the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the prophets of Israel, who prophesy, and say to those who prophesy out of their own heart, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus said the Master Yahweh, Woe to the foolish prophets who are following their own spirit without having had a vision. O Israel, your prophets have been like foxes among ruins. You have not gone up into the breaches, nor did you build a wall for the house of Israel to stand in battle on the day of Yahweh. Their visions are false, and their divinations a lie, saying, Thus declares Yahweh, when Yahweh has not sent them. Yet they expected the word to be confirmed. Have you not seen a false vision, and have you not spoken a divination of lies? You say, Yahweh declares, when I have not spoken. Therefore, thus said the Master Yahweh, because you have spoken falsehood and seen lies, therefore see, I am against you, declares the Master Yahweh. My hand shall be against the prophets who see falsehood and who divine lies. They shall not be in the council of my people, nor be written in the record of the house of Israel. And they shall not enter into the land of Israel, and you shall know that I am the Master Yahweh. Listen, okay? This is a very strong admonition to anybody that would ever get in front of a microphone. And the woe unto them that's being said here is woe unto those that would read his word especially. Forget about just where he says they're making stuff up out of their own hearts. They'll read his word out of context, bend and twist it, and then said that's what he said when he didn't say it. Why do I read you a whole chapter sometime? So that the context is clear. That's why I'll read you 3 or 4 verses to make a one-verse point, so the context is clear. That's why I'll show it to you in 17 places, so the context is clear. So that it's not a teacher up there taking something and bending it and twisting it into a pretzel so that it doesn't even come close to resembling what Yahweh actually said. My wife will tell you there are times in the past when I've turned channels around, and I do this from time to time. I'll put on the Sunday teachers just so I can check the pulse on what they're teaching, because I need to help undo all that. And I need to know what they're teaching. And they almost always teach the same stuff like the same week. It's like a memo went out. And when I'm doing that and I'm looking at it, my wife will hear me. My kids laugh when I do it. They'll hear me saying, it doesn't say that. Or that's not what it says. And I'm like yelling at the TV. And then sometimes the preacher will say something and my daughter will walk up to me and she'll say, was that right? Was that right? Like I know everything. I was like, she's always expecting that I know. Well, I'm her daddy, of course, right? So she believes that. Well, that's the whole thing. She's trusting that I know everything. She's trusting that I know what's right. Well, guess what? That's what we need to be with our Heavenly Father. We have to trust and know that He knows everything and that what He is everything He teaches us is right. Amen. But then when I'm watching these guys speak and I'm like, how can you say that verse says that? It doesn't say that. And they won't even actually turn to the verse. They'll quote it, and I'll know the verse. And I'll know they just are misquoting it. And it's unbelievable. And this is what they're not afraid of. They're not reading Ezekiel 13 to know that there is a huge admonition here from the Almighty saying, hey, your judgment is going to be harsh. And it says here really quickly, nor will they be written in the record of the house of Israel, those who do this. But realize we have to be aware that we could fall into, and we start becoming huge fans of and following these teachers. That's not to say you can't learn something good from some of these guys on Sunday. They don't teach only wrong. Otherwise, none of us would have been attracted to them in the first place. But if we start holding them up and lauding and praising them as if they're some sort of anointed teachers who are teaching only the truth, you could get swept up into some of the stuff they're sneaking in there, not on purpose, but the way they were taught. That's wrong. And you got to be really careful with those guys. I'm not telling you not to listen to them. I'm not going to be mad if you do. Be really careful. Because I turn them on too, but I turn them on for a purpose. I need to know what they're teaching. Because I need to know what you guys were hearing the 5 minutes before you moved into here. And I need to know what you already sold and told so I can know what I need to do to fix the problem. So I can bring clarity to what you were told. So if I don't turn them on sometimes, as much as it turns me and my stomach sometimes to listen to it, I have to put it on for just a few minutes to get an idea of where they're going. So I can understand the agenda. Does that make any sense? But be aware, the enemy is using these people to give you just enough truth and just enough lie to keep you in that lukewarm problem, to make you useless. Okay? Because if it was only lies, you would never have been attracted to it. So be aware. Be aware. So I do want to encourage us, and now we'll pray for a moment here, that Father, help us to understand where the idols are in our lives. Help us to understand where we're chasing after the desires of the foolishness and the stubbornness of our own hearts. Help us to know where we are becoming useless in your sight and where we need to fix and adjust our walk. Father, show us clearly and give us strength and courage to be able to face the truth about our walks, to be able to face the truth about who we are so that we can fix those things that are not in line with you, but be able to have us be drawn closer to you and not discouraged. And Father, give it to us in small enough doses that we're not discouraged, because I know it could be overwhelming to see and to know how much we fall short. But continually give us encouragement to know that we can hear the words, that we are pleasing in your sight, and that we can have you smile down at us and that we can be useful. So Father, we pray that in Yeshua's name you would give us all these strengths and needs that we have to become useful in your hands, and that you would help us to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and to be able to discern and have the discernment to know what is of you and what is not. So Father, we love you, we thank you, we praise you, and we hope that we are bringing glory to your name, and we do all this in the name of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen and amen.